Hello and welcome. Have the poor become targets for a tobacco industry that's struggling to maintain profits in the developed world? Tobacco companies have been stifled in the increasingly health-conscious West, where bans on advertising, anti-smoking laws and high taxes have dented the bottom line. Now tobacco giants are finding a new generation of consumers in emerging countries with lax regulations. To counter that, international laws are now being proposed to regulate the production of cigarettes. But pro-tobacco groups say that could cause an economic crisis in some developing nations by depriving millions of tobacco farmers of their livelihoods. So in today's show we ask, as tobacco becomes an increasingly lucrative business in the developing world, what responsibility do governments have in protecting public health? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or an email, and we welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining me to discuss these issues are Patrick Reynolds, an anti-tobacco advocate who represents the Foundation for a Smoke-Free America. Mr. Reynolds is the grandson of American tobacco company founder R.J. Reynolds and joins us from Los Angeles. And in Lisbon, we have Antonio Abrunhosa, Chief Executive of the International Tobacco Growers Association, a non-profit group that works towards the preservation of tobacco markets worldwide. Gentlemen, I welcome you both to the show.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Reynolds, sir, if I could start with you and ask you, how much truth is there in the belief that the tobacco industry is actively targeting the developing world to make up for the losses in the developed world where smoking has been seen to be on the decline in many areas?
Well, yeah, absolutely it's true. They saw the smoking declining in the United States and Europe, and where cigarette taxes were increased, and they've put ads on television educating children in schools, banning smoking in public places. So in the developed world, smoking has indeed been on the decline. So they began targeting poor people in the third world and in Asia and the Middle East, ads on television, and totally going after them. In fact, there was a 73% increase in worldwide smoking, largely attributed to these efforts, even targeting women. And they're trying to protect their profits. They're going where people are not as well educated, not as aware of the danger of smoking, and certainly taking advantage of people who believe that smoking Western cigarettes confers status on them. It really will cause tremendous death and disease, and 5 million people every year, 5.4 million, are dying from smoking, and that number is expected to rise because of the huge increase in smoking worldwide in recent years because of tobacco company marketing.
We'll talk about some of those issues in a moment, Mr. Reynolds. Let me just ask you quickly, have you seen any kind of development of groups like yours in other areas in the developing parts of the world to try to counter some of the issues you've raised here?
Oh, absolutely. We've seen groups being funded by the Center for Tobacco Policy, and the tobaccofreecenter.org is the website for any group around the world that would like to get support to pressure local governments to ban smoking or raise tobacco taxes, any of the policies which have been proven to reduce smoking among our children. And make no mistake, it's only children who start smoking. 9 out of every 10 smokers got addicted before reaching their 19th birthday. After 19, almost nobody starts smoking, and it's only children who are willing at that rebellious age to start with the tobacco product, and they don't even know, they have no idea how addicting tobacco is.
Well, let me bring in Antonio Abrunhosa here, and thank you for joining us as well, sir. I know you represent the International Tobacco Growers Association. Let me ask you to what degree you feel that the smoking and tobacco industry in general is being misrepresented in some of these with some of these issues.
Well, I wanted to thank you because in the first place, this is one of the few occasions I have to defend the growers, and I would like to highlight at the beginning that I'm representing the growers, tobacco growers from all over the world. I'm not representing manufacturers.
I understand.
And as a matter of fact, one of the things that has been worrying us is that we can't convey our message to mostly the decision makers and the places where these decisions are being taken, especially all the WHO, the World Health Organization fora that have been discussing and deciding on these issues after the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control was approved and ratified by more than 160 countries. We've been trying to give our expertise on the problems that might come out of these decisions on smoking. We don't have anything against controlling smokers and controlling smoking, but the point is, you have 1 billion smokers in the world, and they are increasing by various reasons. This increase in demand we'll have to have a response from production. We don't understand why producers should be taken as hostage in this discussion, which is much beyond them, without their opinion being heard.
Now, I wonder, Mr. Abrunozar, to what degree you have the difficulty in stating your case, because, of course, the industry itself, the manufacturers are, of course, linked to the tobacco growers, and you have the issue of the intense health campaigns that target the impacts of smoking. How do you balance the need to protect your growers and the dangers of smoking?
There's a lot of space for maneuver if things are being taken correctly. You know, we know that smoking is not a healthy issue. We don't discuss that. And we don't discuss the legitimacy of the health sector and the health ministries to do whatever they can or whatever they want on smoking habits. But what we confront the ministries with is that these discussions about what happens in agriculture especially, but not only, on the jobs related with tobacco, is that the ministries of health know very little about the issue. And most of the discussions being held, especially in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, have almost no representatives from ministries of agriculture, ministries of trade, ministries of finance, ministries of employment, which are sectors which will be heavily impacted by the decisions taken. Right. I was present in the Uruguay meeting that just happened in November, called the Conference of the Parties of the Convention last November, and we were not allowed to participate in the debates. Even representing probably, it's the only organization in farming that represents more than 30 million people working in tobacco, in the tobacco fields.
Let me get in.
I'd like to interrupt, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Reynolds.
Which is to say that look, Mr. Abrunozar, with all due respect, your group is funded by the tobacco industry. It was founded by the tobacco industry, and because of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, the FCTC, promoted by the World Health Organization in Geneva and signed on now, not by 160 nations, but 171 nations have now ratified it. And the major points have passed. The tobacco industry, with its front groups like yours, could not stop the four major points of the Treaty on Tobacco Control. The 4 points were encouraging nations to ban smoking in public places, in restaurants, in bars, in internet cafes, to limit or ban tobacco advertising where their constitutions would permit it, to raise tobacco taxes, and no other strategy has worked so well at stopping children from starting to smoke or encouraging smokers to quit, and finally to have graphic warning labels on the sides of cigarettes with pictures of diseased lungs. Those are the issues, the strategies on our side which have proven to reduce smoking rates among kids and adults. And since you couldn't stop those particular points from being passed and ratified by all of the nations, now you're going after the smaller, lesser points such as additives in Articles 9 and 10. Additives, sir, have really not stopped the tobacco industry from selling their burley tobacco in countries where additives have been banned.
Let me,
so, I mean, this is just a lie, and you're shifting the blame, you're shifting our attention away from the fact that this is a tremendous public health issue and onto the fact that it may hurt some small tobacco farmers.
Okay.
You
Mr.
can
Reynolds?
plant things that nourish people. You could plant things that don't poison people.
Okay, Mr.
Like
Reynolds,
corn or wheat.
Mr. Reynolds, let me get Mr. Abrunozar to respond, and also and take up that issue, Mr. Abrunozar, the issue of alternative crops, the prospect of trying to change the crops that some growers have.
I would like, Riz.
Go ahead, sir.
Riz, I would like to start saying that what Mr. Reynolds has just said is an absolute example of the ignorance of what's happening on the farming sector. If I was funded by the tobacco industry, my staff wouldn't be me and 2 people. I would probably would have 350 people, like some NGOs present in Uruguay were blaming that they have working for them. If I was funded by Mr. Bill Gates and by Mr. Bloomberg, I would have a much louder voice. I'm funded by my members, and my members are mainly organizations of tobacco growers from all over the world. And Mr. Reynolds knows
funded by the
nothing
tobacco
about what's
industry,
happening.
sir.
He never met me. No, but you never met me. You don't know what the ITGA is about. So that's precisely the question. Why don't you allow the ITGA to explain their opinion and to explain their works, its works? And why don't you allow the organizations of tobacco growers in Brazil? Our organization represents affiliated members, 184,000 people working in the fields. are all funded by the tobacco industry. These are growers. They were present in Uruguay, but outside the room. Okay. Inside the room, there was a group of people representing 4,000 tobacco growers. WHO accepts as representative a group representing 4,000 growers and leaves outside the room 184,000 people from Brazil. This is the way WHO is working and the anti-tobacco lobby is working. Now, the impact on tobacco growing is huge. What Mr. Reynolds was saying was another lie and another ignorance. The ingredients ban, if it was going to be the way WHO was wanting it, the Canadian way, like it was done in Canada last year, would have a huge impact in countries like Malawi, because the blending of cigarettes is not the same way. I'm not a manufacturer, but I've been asking my clients. And what I've been explained is that the blending of American type of cigarettes is much more difficult or almost impossible, as it is happening in Canada right now, without some ingredients that were being banned by or wanted to be banned by WHO. Now, the impact of this on growing would be a catastrophe.
Well, let me ask Mr. Abrinosa, let me ask you one thing. This issue of developing alternative crops for the tobacco growers to give them some kind of security, something that may not have the controversy or the potential dangers of tobacco. Is there no alternative for those tobacco growers to change crops?
That's precisely the problem, Riz. We've been asking WHO to let us in because there's probably no one in the world who knows better what alternative crops can be done and which one cannot be done to replace tobacco than the ITGA members. We've done a lot of work on that. We have a lot of members. We have organizations from 26 countries all over the world, from all continents, and we've done a lot of research and a lot of work, and we know where it works and where it doesn't work, what works and what doesn't work. We have a lot of experience. Why are not we allowed to explain this to the experts in health who know nothing about agriculture? Now, we've tried to do this
because you're working for the tobacco industry. That's why you weren't allowed. It's not permitted.
Mr. Reynolds,
I'm not working. That's a lie.
Sir,
that's a lie.
Mr. Reynolds, I'll get you in just a second.
That's a lie, Mr. Reynolds. You don't know what I'm doing. That's a lie.
Yes, I do. I know very well what you're doing. You're deflecting attention from the fact that this is a public health issue. This is not an issue of growing tobacco. It's an issue of people are dying.
All right,
you're taking blood money from the tobacco industry.
Mr. Reynolds, let me ask you to answer an email question.
Reynolds, have you ever been in Malawi?
Mr. Abrinosa, I'll get to you in just a second. Let me get Mr. Reynolds an email question from our viewers, because on this show we try to get some email questions. Well, so for Mr. Reynolds, this question came
quickly, I have to respond.
All right.
I'd like to respond and just say that in Malawi and in Zimbabwe, tobacco growing has not alleviated poverty. There will not be a shortage of smokers in coming years because of the huge amounts of young people now growing into adulthood. They'll be smoking, some of them, even if we reduce the percentage of people who smoke, which we hope to do through the global treaty by the UN and the World Health Organization. There will be more smokers.
Right. Mr. Reynolds, let me get
even if you reduce the percentage, there's going to be more. You're not going to have a problem farming tobacco. Right. And you know what?
Mr.
In
Reynolds?
the States, when we did see tobacco grow, when we did see tobacco go down in consumption, we transited farmers from tobacco growing into fruit and vegetable production. This whole argument of tobacco growing being a problem for the economies is a lie. It hasn't alleviated poverty in Malawi or Zimbabwe, and it certainly they could grow corn or wheat or things that nourish people and don't poison them, and when used as intended.
Mr. Reynolds, I'm going to get Mr. Abrinosa.
Blood money.
Let me get a response from Mr. Abrinosa in just a moment, but let me get from you, Mr. Reynolds, a response to an email question we got from Pakistan from a viewer by the name of Saman Uruj Zishan, who wrote in saying, awareness of tobacco's harmful effects is especially low in Asia, Africa and the Middle East. It can even be cool, a symbol of modernity. There is almost no effort by the private or public sector in spreading awareness. So I'm wondering to what degree, I asked you earlier about the growth of groups that would increase awareness. What is being actively done to try to make young people aware of this and tackle the problem with the young generation that is inclined to start smoking?
Well, in some countries, very little is being done. I would like to go on a world tour and speak to children with the press invited. My grandfather was R.J. Reynolds, who founded the tobacco company. My father died from smoking. That's why I turned on my heritage and on my family's business, and why I've done everything to stop people from smoking. When I was invited to Greece, I was profiled in 2 TV networks, 5 major national newspapers. I'd like to do that in Saudi Arabia and all over the world if I were to be invited. And our website is tobaccofree.org. That's tobaccofree.org.
Okay.
And I hope to go tour and raise awareness in China and India and Russia and in the Middle East. And I believe that I can make a difference. I know that other programs and other groups are getting funding from the Bloomberg Initiative. The website for that is tobaccofreecenter.org.
Okay.
And local groups can learn how to lobby their governments for smoking bans, higher tobacco taxes, education for people by putting graphic warnings on the sides of cigarette pack labels, and also by putting ads on television. They can get a great reel from the CDC in Washington. There is so much that can be done, and the funding is there.
All right, let me get back to Mr. Antonio Abrinoza and ask, in response to the potential that tobacco growers can have to change their position, change their industry a little bit. An email question came in from South Africa I'd like to put to you. It came from Naushina Mohammed in Johannesburg, who says, it should be entirely illegal to light up a cigarette. Who cares about the industry saving jobs? New industries can create jobs that promote health and vitality. And I wonder what results you've had, Mr. Abrinoza, in approaching governments to try to tackle the situation that the farmers face, in trying to get them to create perhaps some kind of outlet for those farmers, perhaps even new industry, new areas of job creation that might at least give them some prospect of preserving their livelihoods.
Riz, several answers. First one, obviously Mr. Reynolds knows nothing about Africa, he knows nothing about Malawi, nothing about Zimbabwe. I would invite him clearly, I would like to receive him with my members in Zimbabwe and Malawi to show him what he doesn't know about. Now, from the South African perspective, going back to your question before, the alternatives. WHO has their own reports and studies, they've done their own research. Happily for us, one of the researchers they commissioned some studies was an honest man, and he showed to WHO that there is no easy alternative for tobacco growing. When you're talking about a crop that employs more than 30 million people all over the world, and which has mainly small growers all over the world, the alternatives are very difficult to find. And just to give you an example, when the crisis hit in the last 2 years, tobacco had some of the most stable prices all over the world. In Malawi, the export revenue from tobacco went from $180 million to almost $490 million in 2 years. Malawi was one of the most prosperous times, had one of the most prosperous times due to the stability of tobacco prices or even the increase of tobacco prices. So the misery that Mr. Reynolds is talking about is just from reports. He knows Africa probably from reports and news in the television. He's never been there. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well,
now, it's very curious, the question from South Africa, just for the answer for South Africa. If the ban on tobacco growing would go ahead, as Mr. Reynolds wants, and WHO is pressing too, in South Africa probably they would have some 300,000 immigrants from African countries which grow tobacco, because there are no easy alternatives for tobacco growing, and if they lose the tobacco crop, they would have to go probably to the richest economy around, which is South Africa. South Africa already has a huge unemployment rate and would have some hundreds of thousands of migrants from Zimbabwe, Zambia, Uganda, Malawi mainly.
Mr. Reynolds, a question for you, sir.
Let me respond.
A quick question for you, though, first, though, sir. I'll get you to respond in just a second. But let me ask you, if Mr. Abrinoza is actually sincerely asking you to engage and say, look, come and see the issue, that perhaps you can engage in a way that allows there to be a collaboration in trying to reduce the issue of the risks of cigarettes and smoking by engaging the tobacco growers to see what can be done, is that not a reasonable offer?
Of course.
I don't believe anyone's trying to ban tobacco growing. With my colleague's group is trying to stop the additives. They're claiming that the additives article in the convention treaty is going to somehow stop the sale of burley tobacco in those countries. Countries that have banned additives have not are still selling burley tobacco. So that's just a total fabrication on your part. And moreover, if people stop smoking overnight tomorrow. Yes, I do know what I'm talking about, and I've looked into this. I'm afraid you're the one lying to the public here.
Okay.
This is blood money you're taking from the tobacco industry for your group, sir.
Everything that goes against you is a lie. Everything you say is the truth. Well, that's the problem.
If people stop smoking tomorrow, we have a study that shows that they would spend that money that they now spend on tobacco on something else. They'd buy other products. So there would be jobs created in other sectors of the economy. Now, tobacco growing, they're paying them slave wages in those countries. They don't make any money. Tobacco growing growing in Zimbabwe and in Malawi, and I do know about this, sir, has not alleviated poverty in those countries. Take the American tobacco industry. When tobacco sales were declining in America, the tobacco industry began moving the farming of tobacco overseas. They began operating vast mega plantations of tobacco, paying slave wages to the people that worked on those vast mega plantations for tobacco in third world countries and poor countries.
That's
and the fact is that the price of tobacco went down.
All right, gentlemen,
I do know.
Gentlemen, a second. Mr. Reynolds,
the price of tobacco went down. The tobacco industry.
Gentlemen, please, just for a second. Gentlemen, just for a second, please, for a second. All right, Mr. Reynolds, a quick question to you that came from a viewer in London, from David Atherton in the UK, who says, for the first time in 50 years, we have seen no reduction in smoking in Europe. People don't want to be bullied by their governments and see smoking as a way to resist. I wonder, are you seeing that kind of counter-reaction to your efforts to stop smoking?
We see it among young people. You know, we hear from the conservatives that, oh, we don't need regulation, we don't need government in our lives. Well, the fact is, if you want to throw out Social Security and medical care by governments around the world, those are government programs. We do need the government in our lives. We do need some regulation. These are complex problems. You cannot govern effectively by a simple, oversimplified slogan. People are looking for oversimplified slogans. That's what led to the rise of Adolf Hitler, an oversimplified idea in governing. Complex problems demand complex solutions. Regulating tobacco and curtailing the tobacco problem by raising tobacco taxes, by putting graphic warning labels on the sides of the packs of cigarettes, ads on television, smoking bans and raising tobacco taxes, banning advertising, limiting it. Those are strategies which have been proven to reduce smoking. Right now, 5 million people around the world, 5.4 million, are dying every year. It's a number that's expected to increase because of the huge marketing by the tobacco industry in poor countries where they didn't know the dangers of smoking. You know, we're seeing just totally preventable death and disease caused by the growing of tobacco and caused by the sale of tobacco in the way they
let me bring in Mr.
glamorous.
Okay, Mr. Abrinosa, let me get you in here and get a perspective on how you see things developing. Can you, if you're saying you're not getting your voice heard, that the growers are not being fully represented and you're not getting a chance to explain your case, what can you do to try to improve a greater awareness, to try to, for example, if you feel that there is a genuine concern here, how can you make people aware of that and try and engage in a way that something can be done to address it?
Riz, we've already done it. Mr. Reynolds obviously does not know what he's talking about. It's not by chance that 19 governments from COMESA, the South African Common Market, approved a motion before the Uruguay meeting saying that they wanted to block the measures being proposed on Article 17 and 18 and 9 and 10. And this was heads of government. And unless Mr. Reynolds thinks that the 19 heads of government from Southern Africa are all paid by the tobacco industry. He just doesn't know. The African Union Ministries of Trade had a common position asking for the same. The African and Caribbean and Pacific governments took a position before the Uruguay meeting asking for the same. They asked a very simple thing. Don't decide before knowing. What Mr. Reynolds said is quite true. It's a pity that he doesn't abide by his own words. Don't turn complex problems into simple solutions. There are no simple solutions on farming. I'm talking about farming. I said nothing, and you will never hear me saying nothing against controlling smoking. Not at all. I don't have a position on that. But I know that this is going to take a long time. You have 1 billion smokers out there, and they're going to go smoking. As a matter of fact, they are increasing. WHO recognizes that the number of smokers is increasing. So now, the question is, how can production be helped to find alternatives? WHO had in Article 17, when it was approved, the Framework Convention of Tobacco Control, had an article saying that WHO would help the governments to find alternatives to tobacco growers. They didn't do anything. It was appalling, the lack of work done by WHO in the meeting in Uruguay, trying to find alternatives to tobacco growing. Now the question is, if the demand is there, why should the growers be taken out of the crop? Okay. There was a proposal for Article 17 and 18.
Right.
There was a proposal saying that government should reduce the area with tobacco.
Let me give you the big picture.
Gentlemen, I have to apologize. I have to apologize because we completely ran out of time. I really would love to continue this debate. I do want to thank you both very much for this. I know it's a complex debate, but I thank you both for taking part.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for your visit.
The same.
Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you for being with us. Remember, you can follow our program on Twitter. We'll keep you notified on upcoming shows and can send us your questions and comments to post to our guests. On the next show, Christians under attack in the Middle East. Growing violence against Iraqi Christians and Egyptian Copts have triggered fear and uncertainty among minorities in the region. Are the governments able or willing to protect them, and could this tension spread to the rest of the Arab world? Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.